Good afternoon, everyone. What a pleasure it is for me to be back in Windsor. I'm here at Anchor Danley, which is an over 100-year-old Canadian company that is one of the largest tool and die manufacturers in North America, if not the largest. It's a perfect example of the kind of work that we've been doing in Canada and the United States for generations now, as half of the customers here from this plant are in the United States, half are in Canada. Many of them are parts of the automotive industry or other industries that then do work with customers and suppliers on both sides of the border. For generations, for decades, Canadians and Americans have been building things together, growing communities, growing prosperity, competing successfully with the world in ways that have made North America the most successful economic region in the world. The reality is the proposed tariffs by the incoming American administration will raise costs on American consumers, will put American jobs at risk. That's not something anyone wants because our economies are so intertwined. We want to see American jobs created and prospering alongside the Canadian jobs and prosperity that we successfully create here. So we're going to continue to explain to Americans that bringing in tariffs on goods from Canada is basically raising prices on American consumers, is raising taxes on the backs of Americans. Nobody wants that. But if indeed the incoming administration moves forward with these unfair and unjust tariffs, Canada will respond. We will respond in measured ways, but in robust ways, demonstrating once again that Canadians know how to stand up for ourselves. We've seen over the past weeks Canadians pull together all across the country with a pride in our identity, with a pride in our economy, with a pride in country that usually only happens around Olympic hockey games. It has been wonderful to see how strongly Canadians are speaking up about being proud to be Canadian. And it's also been wonderful to see so many people pull together across the political spectrum. The premiers yesterday, business and leaders across the country with the Council on Canada-US Relations, and ordinary Canadians, including workers at this plant, standing up to make sure that we move forward in the right directions. On est dans un moment critique pour notre pays où de défendre les emplois ici au Canada exige que nous défendons les travailleurs aux États-Unis aussi contre ces tarifs injustes que le président arrivant veut imposer. Nous savons que ces tarifs que propose M. Trump vont faire du mal aux Américains, aux consommateurs, à l'économie américaine. Et nous allons aussi protéger les emplois ici au Canada. On va répondre de façon robuste, mais responsable aux tarifs s'ils arrivent. Et on va continuer d'être très fiers d'être Canadiens et de se rassembler d'un bout à l'autre de ce pays. The world is in a complicated place right now. We're seeing massively shifting geopolitics. The reason, all the more reason for us to pull together as a North America, creating jobs, creating prosperity, and competing successfully with the world. That will continue to be my focus. That is what we're standing up and fighting for all together as part of Team Canada, and that's how we're going to continue to create prosperity on both sides of the border. Je vous remercie beaucoup d'être ici aujourd'hui. On va continuer de travailler ensemble pour créer de la prospérité des deux côtés de la frontière, et j'ai bien hâte à prendre vos questions.
All right, we'll begin the round of questions. Please state your name and outlook before we start.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Sharif Hassan from the Canadian Press. It's being reported that both Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney have said that they would remove consumer carbon price if they become the Liberal Party leader. I wonder what are your thoughts on it and what do you have to say to them?
We only have to look at the wildfires in California, at the increasing cost of climate change, about the fact that so much of the world is understanding the advantages and the economic growth that comes from decarbonization, to realize we need to continue to fight climate change as a way of creating jobs and prosperity for people right across the country and indeed around the world. That's why we move forward with a price on pollution that both reduces our emissions and puts more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians right across the country. Obviously, people running in elections and running for the leadership will be able to put forward their own ideas about how to fight climate change. But I'm very, very proud of our record of standing up and fighting climate change and making life more affordable for Canadians.
Monsieur, en français.
Nous savons tous que de lutter contre les changements climatiques, ce n'est pas juste une façon de protéger l'avenir pour nos petits-enfants, c'est une façon de créer des bons emplois maintenant et pour les années à venir. C'est pour ça qu'en tant que gouvernement, on a mis de l'avant un prix sur la pollution qui non seulement est en train de réduire nos émissions de gaz à effet de serre et protéger la planète, mais aussi en train de remettre plus d'argent dans les poches de 8 sur 10 Canadiens à travers le pays. Évidemment, différents politiciens peuvent proposer différentes façons de lutter contre les changements climatiques et les libéraux et les Canadiens vont faire des choix. Mais je suis très fier de ce qu'on a pu faire pour lutter contre les changements climatiques et faire croître l'économie en même temps.
Bienvenue Senga, Radio-Canada. On a vu hier la première ministre de l'Alberta, Danielle Smith, qui a refusé de signer la déclaration conjointe après la réunion des premiers ministres. Est-ce que ça n'affaiblit pas l'unité canadienne d'avoir une province qui fait essentiellement cavalier seul?
Je pense qu'au contraire, c'est important que tous les différents premiers ministres puissent exprimer leurs préoccupations pour leurs citoyens, leurs industries, ce que tous les premiers ministres ont fait autour de la table. Mais en fin de compte, la grande majorité, effectivement, tous les premiers ministres, sauf Mme Smith, ont choisi de mettre le Canada d'abord et de se rassembler en termes d'équipe Canada pour faire front commun contre l'approche injuste de l'administration américaine qui arrive. Je pense que c'est à Mme Smith d'expliquer pourquoi elle a choisi de ne pas mettre les Canadiens en premier. Et je pense aussi que c'est à M. Poilievre de dire s'il se range avec Équipe Canada, avec tous les premiers ministres, incluant le gouvernement fédéral, ou est-ce qu'il se range avec Danielle Smith, Kevin O'Leary et évidemment Donald Trump. I think it was really important yesterday as we met with first ministers from across the country that premiers have an opportunity to express the interests of their citizens, of their industry, of their area. Certainly, I don't blame Danielle Smith for speaking up for her industry. That's part of her job. But every single premier other than Danielle Smith then chose to put Canada first and say, but we're all part of Team Canada because what happens to any part of us happens to all of us, and we will be there to respond strongly, to fight for Canada, and to do it in a united way that makes sure that it's fair across all industries, across all regions. That was what we came together yesterday to do. I would actually like to point out to Danielle Smith that Canadians know the importance of standing up for each other. That's why Canadian taxpayers bought the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion, TMX, to be able to get Albertan oil to new markets. That was an investment that all Canadians made, that the Alberta government is making billions of dollars off of, because in what was a very difficult decision, the federal government, we made the decision to purchase and build and complete that pipeline. That's an example of all Canadians standing up for Alberta and getting it done. So yes, premiers should be advocating for their own industries, their own country, their own communities, but they should also put their country first, as every single premier except Danielle Smith did. I could point to any number of those premiers and point out lots of moments in which they have points of disagreement with me. From Doug Ford to Scott Moe to Tim Houston to even David Eby and Wab Kinew and others. There's all sorts of disagreements we're going to have. But when push comes to shove, every single one of them are Canadians first. And yes, they're going to look out for their communities, but they also know that looking out for all of us is what everyone in their communities expect us to do. And on top of that, I think it's very clear that right now, Pierre Poilievre, who wants to be Prime Minister for all Canadians, has a choice to make. Either he stands up to fight for all Canadians alongside all premiers and the federal government that are doing that, or he chooses to stand with Danielle Smith, Kevin O'Leary, and ultimately Donald Trump.
Michelle Molesky from CTV Windsor, thank you for taking our questions, Prime Minister. If you're not seeking re-election, you're not running in the Liberal leadership, respectfully, why are you here in Windsor? This essentially feels like a campaign whistle-stop visit of our wonderful city. Why spend all this money on security and travel if you're not campaigning?
The job of a Prime Minister is not first and foremost to campaign. The job of a Prime Minister is to fight for Canadians, fight for these workers who here in Windsor are more exposed to trade with the United States than anyone else. And being here to reassure members of unions, people on the shop floor here, that the federal government continues to be there for them and will fight for them in this incredibly crucial time where an incoming American administration is proposing tariffs that would damage not just people here in Windsor, but people right across the country and indeed in the United States. This is a time for a Prime Minister to show up and fight, and that is exactly what I'm doing. The fact that I have put aside the partisanship to a large degree right now so I can focus on fighting for Canada in the time remaining to me as Prime Minister is actually a comfort to many Canadians who know that the government that was able to steer us through the first challenges that Donald Trump put forward as we successfully renegotiated NAFTA, as we got him to lift off the unfair tariffs on steel and aluminum, will be there once again to pull together Team Canada and fight for Canada. So I'm glad to be in Windsor, and I'm going to continue to do my job as Prime Minister every single day, which is defending Canadian interests, standing up for Canada, and actually defending the most successful trading relationship in the world between Canada and Americans for the good both of Canadians and of Americans. Je suis ici à Windsor aujourd'hui parce que c'est important qu'un premier ministre continue de défendre les intérêts des Canadiens. J'ai mis la politique partisane un peu de côté pour pouvoir me concentrer sur la job que je dois faire, d'être premier ministre pour tous les Canadiens à tous les jours, surtout dans ce moment crucial de menace d'une nouvelle administration américaine. Nous allons être là pour démontrer que nous pouvons non seulement défendre les emplois au Canada, mais défendre les emplois et des gens aux États-Unis en défendant le partenariat le plus réussi dans l'histoire de la planète entre le Canada et les États-Unis.
Taylor Campbell with the Windsor Star. Mr. Prime Minister, with the threat of possible tariffs looming, what is your message to Windsor-Essex workers in the agriculture and the automotive sector who will be devastated by those?
My message to workers here in Windsor, and I spoke with them today and I spoke with a number of union leaders as well, is that we understand how integrated the economy here is in trade with the United States, and we understand how integrated the economy in the United States is with Canada. Anything that thickens the border or imposes penalties or tariffs between our two countries will hurt Americans as well as Canadians. And our first argument is that these tariffs should not move forward. The incoming administration expressed concerns around the border that they link to tariffs, so we got to work in, first of all, demonstrating that the Canadian-US border is a source of strength for our country. that it is something that is not the source of challenges for the United States. Indeed, half of 1% of the fentanyl going into the United States come from Canada. Half of 1% of migrants into the United States come from Canada. Borders are not the issue, but still we put in over $1 billion to upgrade and strengthen our border processes to prevent the flow of illegal goods and people in both directions, because that's something that the circumstances require. But we're not just fighting for good jobs here in Windsor, Essex. We're fighting for good jobs right across the country, because if these tariffs move forward, there is no corner of Canada or of the United States that won't be negatively impacted by Donald Trump's decision to raise prices on Americans. Nous sommes ici pour défendre les intérêts et des Canadiens et des Américains. Parce qu'il n'y a aucun coin de notre pays, surtout ici à Windsor-Essex, mais à travers le pays aussi, qui va être impacté par ces tarifs américains. Mais les Américains, eux aussi, vont être impactés quand Donald Trump montre les prix sur plein de denrées dont ils ont besoin dans leur vie de tous les jours en augmentant les tarifs.
Hi, Prime Minister. Jennifer LaGrassa with CBC Windsor. As you reflect on your legacy, how do you feel knowing that the consumer carbon tax is all but dead?
I am not spending any time right now reflecting on my legacy. I'm very much focused on continuing to do the work as Prime Minister. We are facing significant challenges to our economy from south of the border, and we're fighting for that every single day. We're facing increasing challenges from climate change at home and around the world. And we're continuing to step up by having moved forward on a price on pollution that not only reduces emissions and incentivizes green investment, but puts more money in people's pockets right across the country. Future governments will make the choices they make, but Canadians can know that it is possible to both fight climate change and put more money in the pockets of the middle class at the same time.
Rusty Thompson, AM 800 CKLW. Why do you believe you're effective right now in helping lead Canada's response to the tariff threats when the other side, the Trump administration, knows you're on your way out the door and might not ultimately be the person they're going to be dealing with and trying to sort this out?
Canadians had an election in 2021 that sent me into the Prime Minister's office once again. And every day I am here, I have a job to do in standing up for Canadians, in fighting for our economy, in creating good jobs in Canada and in the United States. And that's what we have been doing over the past number of years, and that's what I am going to continue to do. As you saw yesterday, whether it's premiers, whether it's the Business Council, the Canada-U.S. Relations Council we announced this morning, Canadians are pulling together as part of Team Canada, and my focus every single day will be to pull Canadians together as we stand for a better future and a brighter future for all of us.
Last question, sir.
Hi, Maureen from Blackburn News. Has there been any indication from the Trump administration that the border measures you introduced could be enough to stop the tariffs?
I can say that the border plan that we put forward and the measures we put forward have been very well received by different members of the incoming American administration. What the president is going to choose to do will be entirely up to the president, but we are confident that we have demonstrated that Canada is not the source of border challenges for the United States. Around 1% of illegal fentanyl coming into the United States comes through Canada. The rest, 99.5%, comes in through Mexico and other places. The similar thing for migrants. We have strengthened and will continue to strengthen our border together. We have a great partnership with the United States on protecting our border. That's not the issue. We've continued to act on that and put significant money forward, but it'll be up to the American incoming administration whether or not they want to move forward with tariffs that will be raising prices for American consumers and harming one of the strongest economic relationships in the world at a time where our continent should be taking on the world, should be competing successfully with countries around the world instead of choosing to fight amongst ourselves. Évidemment, on a pris des mesures sérieuses pour renforcer nos frontières, mais nous avons reconnu depuis les débuts que la frontière que les États-Unis ont avec le Canada n'est pas la source de leurs problèmes. Moins que la moitié d'1% du fentanyl qui rentre aux États-Unis passe par le Canada. Autour de la moitié d'1% de tous les migrants qui arrivent aux États-Unis passent par le Canada. Donc, ce n'est pas nous le problème. Les différents membres de l'administration entrant aux États-Unis ont été contents de voir nos plans et les mesures qu'on est en train de prendre sur nos frontières, mais ce sera à M. Trump ultimement de décider ce qu'il va vouloir faire et s'il va aller de l'avant avec des tarifs qui, d'abord et avant tout, vont faire mal aux consommateurs américains, vont faire mal à la productivité américaine et, évidemment, vont faire mal au Canada aussi.
Today's press conference, ça conclut la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui. Thank you, everyone.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Bonne journée.